Jefferson Robbins with NCWLIFE. The Chelan-Douglas Land Trust oversees about 27,000 acres of land that it keeps in trust for the use of the community and also for stewardship and conservation. Hanne Beener is the executive director of that operation. She joins me now. Thanks for letting us stop by to talk to you, Hanne.
Of course, nice to do it.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and in particular your prior experience. I think you've been working in things like land stewardship for a while before joining the Land Trust as director.
Yeah, so I worked for the Chelan-Douglas Land Trust for about 10 years, from 2013 to 2023, moving from a very entry-level post-hole digger in 2013 to kind of a senior manager, department head of our public access program in 2023. And then I stepped away to work for another local nonprofit, TREAD, to do some research that actually benefited the Land Trust about sustainable funding and management of outdoor rec resources in the region. And prior to the Land Trust, I had been with the Forest Service doing wildland firefighting.
When you first got into your professional life, when you became an adult and were looking around for things to do, was outdoors and working on the land just a natural call for you?
Yeah, I grew up in Ferry County in the rural northeastern part of the state, and it's being on the land and identifying strongly a sense of like physical place in the world was something that I grew up with, and I know a lot of the people that were in my cohort as well did. And so it felt natural to want to be a part of taking care of a place. And I learned that I had pursued some different avenues of study, more related to like international studies. Did some time working in an embassy on an internship in college and came away with, whoa, that's actually not what I want to do. I'm glad I did an internship to find out, and came back and really leaned heavily into wilderness and parks and protected areas management.
When you think about the Land Trust, do you see it as a stewardship agency or as an education agency? I mean, you seem to have fingers in a lot of different sectors.
Right. Yeah, I primarily see the Land Trust as being a land manager. So we are in the same vein as a Parks Department or the Department of Fish and Wildlife or state parks, in the sense that we actually hold land and manage it in perpetuity. So much more in the vein of stewardship. That being said, because we are a nonprofit, we can remain nimble and very responsive and sensitive to the needs of the community. And so that brings in a lot more texture to how we do business. And one part of that is really inviting the public to join us in helping care for these lands, because that's what really makes our work sustainable for the long term, is if people are engaged in caring for the land, then they will continue to care for that for future generations. So it's a mix, but we certainly, our identity is very much wrapped up in stewarding the lands that are in our portfolio.
When you came on, you probably sort of inherited a whole portfolio, to use your word, of projects that are in progress, ongoing, about to get launched, or need to be considered for the future. So are there particular projects coming up that you get really excited about, that you're like, I want to be director long enough to see that one through?
Yeah, there's a lot of those. The interesting thing with like land conservation opportunities looking to the future is that so many of them are sensitive and have confidentiality, but broadly speaking, we have a public access plan that speaks to the areas that are a high priority for us to protect, and those are community identified areas as well. We also have habitat considerations that we have a habitat management plan, so we do a lot of weighing of options. I think the things in that vein that I get excited about are thinking about where we can have the biggest impact on climate resiliency in our region. And by that I mean, where are the areas that we're going to protect that are going to have the biggest bang for the buck as far as, the sustainability of wildlife, plants, and other habitat considerations in the future. And then right alongside that, where are we going to be able to conserve lands that actually have benefits to our human population in the face of climate change? I think that's an important consideration that the Land Trust is kind of still wrestling with how to engage in that. Other than that, in more of the near term, we are doing our strategic plan next year. And so I'm really excited to actually work with the board in this role, which I haven't been in before. I've gone through a couple of strategic planning processes in the past with the Land Trust, but not in the director role. So I'm really looking forward to kind of looking at what are some of these areas that we want to really lean into intentionally. And then, even more immediate than that, or I guess more tangible, is that we're working with the city of Wenatchee. We have a long-standing partnership with them. That is how we as a community have the Wenatchee foothills, and the legacy of that protected open space and trail system is through a partnership between the city and the Land Trust. And we are going to embark on a new project in 2026 where the city will acquire 134 acres we're calling the Lookout Natural Area, and it's right there on the arm of Birch Mountain above Omi Gardens. The Land Trust has been working with the Omi family for almost a decade to try and protect this 134 acres, and the city will hold it, and the Land Trust and the city will co-manage that for both conservation values and public access in the future. So.
And that's something about the Land Trust that many people don't think about. They might see you as an owner or a caregiver of land, but they don't think about how often you do work with landowners and you do work in partnership.
Yeah, and we are so fortunate to have Mickey Fleming, our conservation director, who has been here for I think 17 years. And the thing about land conservation that I mentioned earlier is really that those deals take a long time to come to fruition. So it's an initial conversation with the landowner, and sometimes it can be a decade or more before we're bringing something to our board of directors for approval to move forward to like a final acquisition or transaction. So having those relationships in the community and really investing in having staff be at the Land Trust for the long term really helps us make progress on those goals. They're not transactional. They're very much relationship building.
Well, the Land Trust turned 40 this year, 40 years old. Are there ways that you want to see it kind of adapt and grow for the next 40 years while you're director?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is the Land Trust is just a very steadfast entity. We take ownership or management of land, we conserve it for a variety of public benefits and conservation values, and we steward it forever. And so I think it's less about doing a lot of new things, but adapting to where our community is at in order to keep doing what we do really well. And so I think that stewardship in perpetuity is something that both the board president and myself spoke about at our annual dinner recently, and I think it's where we're in step, that this is our role, we do it really well, and we're gonna keep doing it and giving the assurance to our community that we're gonna be there for the long term.
Land Trust seems to have some advantages in that a lot of its people who are very enthusiastic about the outdoors and about stewardship of the outdoors, who may have gone through the agency are still around. You worked for Bob Boogert when he was executive director. Bob's still very much a presence. Do you see yourself turning to those voices of people who've been through the agency but are now on the outside? Do you see yourself looking to people like them for advice?
Absolutely. I'm so fortunate to be able to count Bob as a good friend and a mentor, and also Kurt Soper, who was another ED that I worked for. And then I've gotten to know Gordon Congdon, who was actually the first ED of the Land Trust. And to be able to spend some time, I interviewed all of them when I came on for our 40th anniversary, and to learn from them how the community perception of the Land Trust has changed over the years, from people not really understanding what it did, to people being unsure if it was the right entity to be doing the work that it was doing, to being widely known and accepted as a critical piece in the fabric of our community. So I really stand on the shoulders of a lot of good work that's been done, and anytime I can recognize that and learn from that, count myself very fortunate.
You talked about community perception of the Land Trust. Is there any particular criticism that you hear about the Land Trust most often? And how do you address it? If people have a critique of the Land Trust, well, they're just taking land that could be developed. How do you reply to that?
Yeah, let me think about that for a minute. I think we do hear mostly, if it's criticism, it's based in how someone's perspective of the best use of land. So if we protect a property in the foothills and we open it to public access and we put new trails in, we will undoubtedly hear that that was really nice as habitat and it's unfortunate that you put trails in on it. At the same token, if we protect an area that was not protected legally and was privately owned, but people were accessing it, and we put a seasonal closure on it to protect wildlife, we often hear that we're not doing enough to provide public access. And similarly, if we're taking land out of the tax base or taking land away from development, we have never been anti-development, and I think a lot of our integrity lies in the fact that we think that there's a right place for every kind of thing that is going to benefit our quality of life in the valley, and we try really hard to be sensitive to all the stakeholders and the community in general to figure out what that right place is for each one of those valuable pieces that makes this place a great place to live.
In some ways, it's the access to the outdoors that kind of makes the Wenatchee Valley and Chelan and Douglas counties what they are. Mm-hmm. People appreciate being able to walk more or less out their back doors and be kind of in nature.
Yeah.
And in many ways, the Land Trust has been the lead agency, at least in the near environments of the foothills, in making that happen.
Yeah, it's true. The Trust for Public Land has a whole body of research about living 10 minutes away from open space and parks and some sort of natural area or access to being in nature. And that's something that we strive to provide, and as our valley is facing a lot of conversion of ag land, development pressures, I think it's really important that we hold that in mind. There's not going to be anyone who comes in and says, this gives us the master plan. It's up to us to work together to develop that master plan and really think about protecting the possibilities so that future generations continue to have a choice to make.
Hanne, what's your favorite area of Chelan-Douglas Land Trust Conservancy? Is there a particular place that you like to visit most often when you can?
Well, I live in the Upper Valley, so I do enjoy Mountain Home. I spend a lot of time there. I would say, though, that the project that probably brings me the most satisfaction as having been something I worked on is the Kashmir Canyons Preserve. We had some wonderful private landowners to work with there, and it's just a unique preserve in that it's privately owned, it has public access. The landowner and the land trust work really collaboratively to bring that online and then also to continue managing it. So that one's really special as well.
You mentioned Mountain Home Reserve, and there was recently a community burn pile workshop,
yeah,
which I thought was kind of interesting because if you're managing forest land, you do need to thin. You do need to do some controlled harvesting and some controlled burning to make sure that that's a wildfire resilient property. So what led you to want to invite the public into that process and see this is how we treat the forest that we have in our conservancy? Yeah,
I think it is really important work. It's definitely an area that is sensitive. The whole Leavenworth Basin, as you know, is considered extremely high risk for loss of personal property due to wildfire. So the fact that we can do our part, and I don't know if you were up there, but I mean, it was significant, the amount of thinning we did and the amount of fuel that we removed through that pile burn. So I think the value in having the community play a role in that is that we often, especially with smoke, seem to get in the mindset, because we suffered through a lot of smoke in a lot of summers and into the falls now, that this is just really unfortunate that we have this smoke. And I think that we try our best to do that burning when it's going to have the least effect on the population, but it really just gets people out there in helping to steward the land in another capacity. I mean, it's no different than inviting them to help maintain a trail that they use or to take out barbed wire fence that's hindering wildlife progress. So it's really just connecting people with what it means to steward the land so that they can understand it and they will care and they will take that message to further afield to their friends and family.
Hanne, you've been director of the Chelan-Douglas Land Trust for coming up on 6 months now, but you do have, as we mentioned, that longer history with the organization. So if somebody asks you, land trust, what's that? How do you go about describing it?
I say that we are a land manager. We protect and steward property in perpetuity, and we also work with the community to identify what properties we protect and how we're going to take care of them. So what we're going to provide for public access versus conservation values alone. How are these lands going to benefit the public in some way? I think that when I think of the land trust, it's definitely a partner with the community in a lot of ways that is more flexible and more nimble than some of our agency partners are able to be. And we do also have that, outreach and education arm. So really the land trust is an integral part of our community fabric in providing space to improve our quality of life and that of all beings.
Well, Hanne Beener, Executive Director of the Chelan-Douglas Land Trust, thanks for letting me come on by.
Thank you.
You're watching the NCWLIFE channel.